The glint of a revolver caught in the morning light as Nora Keating rode her chestnut mare down the dusty trail, her mind on anything but love. The year was 1876, and the Montana Territory stretched before her like an untamed promise. She'd left behind the comforts of St. Louis 3 months prior, trading silk for leather, parlor songs for lonesome winds. Life on her uncle's ranch had proven more challenging than she'd anticipated, but the 22-year-old was determined to carve out her own place in this rugged land. "Easy, Penny," she murmured as the horse's ears pricked forward, detecting something beyond the bend in the trail. Nora slowed their pace, listening. A sound carried on the breeze, not the typical birdsong or rustling leaves, but something distinctly human. A voice, broken and raw. Rounding the curve revealed a small clearing beside a shallow creek. There, kneeling in the dirt, was a man hunched over the form of a small horse, a colt. The animal's sides heaved with labored breaths. The man's broad shoulders shook slightly, his head bowed. Nora hesitated, torn between respecting his privacy and offering assistance. The decision was made for her when a twig snapped beneath Penny's hoof, and the man jerked upright, one hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip. "I mean no harm," Nora called, raising her hands slightly. "I heard something and thought someone might need help." The man's face was half hidden beneath the brim of a worn Stetson, but she could see tracks of moisture on his sun-bronzed cheeks. He quickly wiped at them with a dusty sleeve. "Nothing to be done here, madam," he said, voice rough as gravel. "Best be on your way." Ignoring his dismissal, Nora dismounted and approached cautiously. The colt was a beautiful paint, no more than a few months old, with unusual markings across its white and chestnut coat. A dark stain spread across its flank, and its breathing came in shallow pants. "What happened?" she asked, kneeling opposite the man. "Mountain lion," he replied tersely. "Caught him separated from the herd. I shot the cat, but—" He gestured helplessly at the wound. "Too much damage." Nora studied him more carefully now. Tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by years of hard work. His clothes were dusty but of good quality, marking him as no ordinary drifter. The ranch brand on his saddle belonged to the Circle S, one of the largest operations in the territory. "I know a little about treating wounds," she offered. "My father was a doctor." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "Guess I still care too much," he said, almost to himself. "Been ranching 15 years now, should know better than to get attached to livestock." Despite his words, his calloused hand gently stroked the colt's neck. "I don't believe caring is something to be ashamed of, Mr. Sawyer, Samuel Sawyer. Most folks call me Sam, Nora Keating." She moved closer to examine the colt. "I work at my uncle's place, the Lazy K, just east of here." Recognition flickered in his eyes, blue as a summer sky, she noticed. "Thomas Keating's niece. Heard he had family come out from back east." The colt nickered weakly, drawing their attention back to the immediate concern. Nora assessed the wounds with a practiced eye. "Do you have any whiskey?" "Clean cloth," Sam nodded, retrieving a flask and a relatively clean bandana from his saddlebag. "Don't think it'll make much difference." "Perhaps not," she acknowledged, "but I can't stand by without trying." For the next half hour they worked together, cleaning the deep gashes as best they could. Sam held the colt steady while Nora dressed the wounds, her fingers working deftly despite the grim prognosis. She spoke softly to the animal throughout, a continuous stream of gentle encouragement. Eventually, the colt's breathing eased slightly, though whether from their ministrations or simple exhaustion was hard to tell. "You have a way with horses," Sam observed, his initial defensiveness softening. "Most city folks I've met are afraid of them." "My mother's family raised horses in Kentucky before the war," Nora explained. "I spent summers there as a child. When everything was lost afterward, we moved to St. Louis." She didn't elaborate on the hardships that had followed, the gradual descent into genteel poverty that had eventually brought her west to her mother's brother. They fell into silence, both watching the colt's labored breathing. The sun climbed higher, beating down on them mercilessly. You should go, Sam finally said. No sense in both of us sitting out here in this heat. And leave you alone. Nora shook her head. No, Mr. Sawyer, I think I'll stay. A look of surprise crossed his features, followed by something that might have been gratitude. Suit yourself, Miss Keating. They shared his canteen of water and some jerky he had in his pack. Nora told him about her journey west, carefully editing out the desperation that had driven it. Sam spoke little of himself, but she gathered he was the foreman at the Circle S, that he'd come to Montana from Texas after the war, and that he had a reputation as one of the best horsemen in the territory. As afternoon stretched toward evening, the colt's condition deteriorated. Its breathing grew more labored, the periods between breaths extending alarmingly. Nora moved to sit beside Sam, their shoulders nearly touching as they kept their vigil. He's fighting, Sam murmured. Yes, she agreed softly. He's very brave. When the end came, it was peaceful, one final breath that simply wasn't followed by another. Sam's hand trembled slightly as he ran it along the colt's neck one last time. He was something special, he said quietly. Out of our best mare and a Mustang stallion that's been running wild in these parts for years. Thought he might combine the best of both the Mustang's hardiness with our stock's temperament. Nora placed her hand gently on his arm. I'm sorry, Mr. Sawyer, he nodded once, jaw tight. Then he rose abruptly, removing his hat to run a hand through dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. Need to bury him before dark. Wouldn't be right to leave him for the scavengers. I'll help, Nora offered, already looking for a suitable spot. Sam regarded her with undisguised surprise. Miss Keating, that's not necessary. I've already spent the better part of the day here, Mr. Sawyer. Another hour won't make a difference. She straightened her shoulders. Now, do you have a shovel or shall we use branches? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. There's a small spade in my pack. Won't be easy digging in this hard ground. I didn't come west expecting things to be easy. They worked together as the sun began its descent, taking turns with the inadequate tool until they'd created a shallow grave beneath a cottonwood tree. Neither spoke much, the physical labor and shared purpose making words unnecessary. When they finally laid the colt to rest, Sam stood with his hat in his hands, head bowed. Safe journey, little one, he said simply. Then, to Nora's surprise, he added, Would you say something? You have a way with words. Touched by his request, Nora cleared her throat. May you run free under endless skies, little colt. May you know no more pain or fear, only the joy of the wind in your mane and the earth beneath your hooves. Sam nodded, seemingly satisfied. They covered the grave in silence, and Nora gathered wildflowers to place atop the freshly disturbed earth. It'll be dark soon, Sam observed, looking at the deepening shadows. Your uncle will be worried. Nora glanced at the sky, realizing with a start how late it had grown. Yes, I should return, though I'm not certain of the quickest route from here. The Lazy K is a good 8 miles east, Sam said. Too far to travel safely after nightfall. My line cabin is just over that ridge, not much to look at, but you're welcome to stay there. I can sleep in the lean-to with the horses. Propriety demanded she refuse, but practicality won out. The wilderness was dangerous enough by day. At night, with predators hunting and treacherous terrain to navigate, it would be foolhardy to attempt the journey. That's very kind, Mr. Sawyer. I accept, provided you send word to my uncle at first light so he doesn't form a search party. Fair enough. He helped her onto Penny, then mounted his own horse, a powerful black gelding. It's not far. True to his word, they crested the ridge as the last rays of sunlight painted the valley golden. Below them sat a small cabin of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney. A corral stood to one side, empty save for 2 horses grazing on the sparse grass. It ain't much, Sam said, suddenly self-conscious. Just a place to stay when I'm working this section of range. It looks perfectly adequate, Nora replied, touched by his concern. In truth, after months in her uncle's crowded household, the idea of a quiet evening alone, nearly alone, held surprising appeal. The cabin's interior was simple but neat. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a small table and 2 chairs nearby. A narrow bed with a patchwork quilt occupied one corner, and shelves lined another wall, holding supplies and a few books, a surprising detail that raised her estimation of Sam Sawyer considerably. "I'll start a fire," he said, moving to the hearth. "There's jerky and beans for supper." "Not what you're used to, I reckon, but it'll keep body and soul together." "Mr. Sawyer," Nora said with a small smile, "you would be surprised at what I've become accustomed to these past months, and I'm perfectly capable of cooking a meal." Something about her confidence seemed to amuse him. "I don't doubt your capabilities, Miss Keating, just your experience with trail cooking. Then perhaps we should combine our efforts." Working together in the small space created an unexpected intimacy. Sam built up the fire while Nora organized their meager provisions, finding coffee and even a small bag of cornmeal tucked among his supplies. Soon the cabin filled with savory aromas as beans simmered and cornbread baked in a cast iron skillet. They ate by firelight, the dancing flames casting warm shadows across the rough walls. Sam's initial reticence gradually gave way to more open conversation, and Nora found herself sharing stories of her adjustment to Western life, her first disastrous attempt at riding herd, her ongoing battle with the cantankerous cook at the Lazy K, her growing love for the vast Montana skies. "Why did you come west?" Sam finally asked, setting aside his empty plate. "Most Eastern ladies I've met view Montana as little better than purgatory." Nora hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "My father died 2 years ago," she began. "He was a good doctor but a poor businessman. There were difficulties afterward." She traced the grain of the wooden table with her finger. "When my uncle offered me a position teaching his children and helping with the household, it seemed providential." "Teaching?" Sam raised an eyebrow. "You're educated then." "I attended the women's college in St. Louis for a year," she said. "But more importantly, I love learning. Knowledge is the one thing that can't be taken from you." Sam was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "My mother believed that too, taught me to read from the Bible and Shakespeare, only books we had. Always said education was the path forward. She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was." His voice held old grief. "Yellow fever took her when I was 12, my father not long after." "I'm sorry," Nora said softly. "It's a hard thing to lose one's parents, no matter the age." He nodded, then seemed eager to change the subject. "You should take the bed, I'll make do out here." "Mr. Sawyer, I couldn't possibly." "Sam," he interrupted, "if we're sharing quarters, seems we could at least use Christian names." "Sam," she acknowledged with a small smile, "and I'm Nora." "But I still can't take your bed." "You can and you will," he said firmly. "My mother would haunt me if I let a lady sleep on the floor. I've bedded down in worse places than my own cabin." Recognizing the futility of argument, Nora conceded. "Thank you then, you're very kind." "Kind." He gave a short laugh. "That's not what most folks would say about me." "Perhaps they haven't seen you with a dying Colt," she replied. Their eyes met across the table, firelight reflecting in his blue gaze. Something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit. Then Sam cleared his throat and rose to clear the dishes. Later, as Nora lay in the narrow bed, listening to Sam's steady breathing from his bedroll near the hearth, she found herself reflecting on the strange turns life could take. Yesterday, Samuel Sawyer had been merely a name occasionally mentioned at her uncle's table, the taciturn foreman of the Circle S, respected but somewhat feared. Today, she'd glimpsed the man behind the reputation, a man capable of tenderness, a man who still cared too much, despite the hardships that had shaped him. Sleep came slowly, her mind filled with images of strong hands gently cradling a dying colt, of blue eyes that held both sorrow and strength, of shoulders that seemed capable of bearing any burden. Dangerous thoughts for a woman whose circumstances offered little room for romantic notions. Yet as she finally drifted off, it was Sam's voice she heard in her dreams, low and resonant. Guess I still care too much. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the cabin's single window. Nora woke to the aroma of coffee and the quiet sounds of movement. Sam stood at the fireplace, his back to her, preparing a simple breakfast. "Good morning," she said, quickly smoothing her hair and straightening her rumpled clothing. He turned, coffee pot in hand. "Morning, hope I didn't wake you." "Not at all." She rose, folding the quilt neatly. "I should help with breakfast. Already done." He gestured to the table where plates of fried salt pork and more cornbread awaited. "Thought we'd eat, then I'd ride over to your uncle's place. Let him know you're safe before he sends the whole county looking for you." "That's thoughtful," Nora said, taking a seat. "Though I fear he may have already begun searching. I've never stayed out overnight before." Sam poured coffee for them both. "Thomas Keating has a reputation as a reasonable man. I'll explain the situation." "And what situation is that exactly?" Nora asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "That his niece spent the night in a line cabin with the Circle S foreman." Sam's expression grew serious. "That his niece showed exceptional kindness to a dying animal and its keeper, and that I ensured her safety when darkness fell by offering proper shelter." He met her gaze steadily. "Your reputation won't suffer on my account, Nora. I give you my word." Touched by his concern, she nodded. "Thank you. Though I confess, reputation seems less important out here than it did in St. Louis." "Don't be fooled," Sam replied, cutting into his salt pork. "Folks out here judge just as harshly, maybe more so. Communities are smaller, news travels faster. A lady's good name is still her most valuable possession." They ate quickly, aware of the day's demands. As they cleared away the breakfast things, Nora found herself reluctant to part ways. Something about Sam Sawyer intrigued her, his contradictions, perhaps. The hard-edged rancher who wept over a colt, the rough-spoken cowboy with Shakespeare on his shelves. "I'll saddle your horse," Sam said, heading for the door. "Wait." Nora touched his arm, surprising them both. "I wanted to thank you, not just for the shelter, but for yesterday. For letting me help with the colt, for sharing that moment." Sam studied her face, something unreadable in his expression. "Most women would have ridden on by," he said quietly. "Most men too, if I'm being honest." "Then most people would have missed something important," she replied. "There's honor in caring, Sam, even when it hurts, especially then." He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, as if coming to a decision. "I'll ride with you all the way back to the Lazy K, safer that way." The journey to her uncle's ranch took most of the morning, their path winding through rolling hills covered with summer grasses. They rode side by side when the trail allowed, their conversation flowing more easily now, punctuated by comfortable silences. Sam pointed out landmarks, shared stories of the territory's early days, and listened attentively as Nora described her hopes of eventually opening a small school for the children of neighboring ranches. "Education matters out here," he agreed, "more than most realize. Land can be taken, cattle can die, but knowledge stays with you." "Exactly," Nora exclaimed, delighted by his understanding. "That's precisely what I've been trying to explain to my uncle. The future of this territory depends on more than just who controls the most land or water." "Your uncle's not convinced," she sighed. "He sees the immediate needs: grazing rights, water access, protection from rustlers. It's difficult for him to look beyond those concerns to something like education." "He's not wrong about the immediate threats," Sam said thoughtfully. "But neither are you about the future." He gave her an appraising look. "You have vision, Nora Keating." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. As they approached the boundaries of the Lazy K, Nora spotted riders heading their way, her cousin James and two ranch hands, their expressions shifting from concern to confusion as they recognized her companion. "Looks like your welcome party," Sam observed dryly. "So it seems." Nora straightened in the saddle, preparing herself for the interrogation to come. "Whatever happens, Sam, I'm glad we met yesterday." "As am I," he replied, his voice low, "though the circumstances could have been kinder." James reached them first, his face flushed with either exertion or anger. "Nora, where have you been? Pa's had us searching since dawn." "I'm perfectly fine, James," she replied calmly. "Mr. Sawyer has been kind enough to escort me home." Her cousin's eyes narrowed as he assessed Sam. "Sawyer," he acknowledged stiffly. "Didn't realize the Circle S had business with our family." "No business," Sam replied evenly. "Just helping a lady in need." The other riders circled around them, creating an uncomfortable tableau. Nora could read the suspicion in their postures, the unspoken questions. "There was an injured colt," she explained, addressing all of them. "I stopped to help Mr. Sawyer tend to it. By the time the poor creature passed, it was too dark to travel safely, so Mr. Sawyer offered the shelter of a line cabin. He's been a perfect gentleman." James looked unconvinced. "Uncle Thomas has been worried sick." "Then let's not keep him waiting," Nora replied, nudging Penny forward. "Mr. Sawyer, thank you again for your assistance." Sam tipped his hat. "My pleasure, Miss Keating." His formality was for the benefit of their audience, but his eyes held a warmth meant only for her. "Perhaps our paths will cross again." "Perhaps they will," she answered, hoping the sentiment wasn't merely politeness. As she rode toward the ranch house flanked by her cousin and the Hands, Nora could feel Sam's gaze following her. She resisted the urge to look back, focusing instead on how to explain her absence to her uncle without causing more complications than necessary. Thomas Keating was waiting on the porch, his weathered face lined with concern that transformed into relief at the sight of her. "Nora, thank God," he exclaimed, coming down the steps to help her dismount. "When you didn't return last night, I feared the worst." "I'm fine, Uncle Thomas," she assured him, accepting his brief embrace. "Truly, I was perfectly safe." With Samuel Sawyer, he raised an eyebrow, having clearly recognized the departing rider. "The Circle S foreman isn't known for his sociability." "Circumstances threw us together," Nora explained, following him into the house. "He was dealing with an injured colt when I happened upon him. I stayed to help, and by the time the animal passed, it was too late to travel safely." Inside, her Aunt Martha waited anxiously, along with her 3 young cousins who should have been at their lessons. Nora endured another round of explanations, carefully emphasizing the propriety of the arrangements and Sam's respectful behavior. "Still," her aunt said with a frown, "it's not appropriate for a young woman to spend the night unchaperoned with a man of Sawyer's reputation." "What reputation is that?" Nora asked, genuinely curious. Thomas and Martha exchanged glances. "He's known to be hard," her uncle said diplomatically. "Effective as a foreman, but not a man who forgives easily or shows much sentiment." Nora thought of Sam's tears over the colt, his gentleness despite his obvious strength, the books on his shelves. "I believe there's more to Mr. Sawyer than his reputation suggests," she said quietly. "Be that as it may," her aunt interjected, "people will talk. We must be mindful of appearances." "I don't see why," James said, entering the conversation. "It's not like Nora will be seeing Sawyer again." The Circle S and Lazy K barely have dealings with each other, and when they do, it's between the owners, not the help. The dismissive term rankled Nora. "Mr. Sawyer is hardly the help, James. He's the foreman of the largest ranch in the territory." "Still works for wages," James shrugged. "Not exactly the sort of connection a lady cultivates." "That's enough, James," Thomas said firmly. "Nora's home safe, and that's what matters. Now let's put this behind us." The subject was closed, at least for the moment, but Nora found herself dwelling on it throughout the day. As she resumed her duties, teaching her cousins their lessons and helping her aunt with household tasks, her thoughts repeatedly returned to the hours spent with Sam Sawyer, the unexpected connection she'd felt, the glimpses of depth beneath his reserved exterior. It was foolishness, she told herself. A brief encounter, nothing more. Their worlds intersected only by chance, and there was little reason to think they would meet again soon. Yet as she gazed out the window toward the distant hills that separated the Lazy K from the Circle S, Nora couldn't quite suppress the hope that somehow their paths would cross again. 2 weeks passed with no word from Sam. Nora threw herself into her responsibilities, expanding her teaching to include several children from neighboring homesteads who now rode over 3 days a week for lessons. The impromptu school was flourishing, giving her a sense of purpose beyond the endless cycle of domestic chores. Then, on a warm Saturday afternoon as she sat on the porch mending, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A lone rider came up the long drive, his familiar silhouette causing her heart to quicken despite her best intentions. Sam Sawyer rode straight-backed on his black gelding, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance clean-shaven, wearing a fresh shirt under his vest, his boots polished. Nora set aside her sewing, smoothing her skirts as she stood. "Mr. Sawyer," she called as he dismounted. "What a surprise, Miss Keating." He removed his hat, revealing hair still damp from recent washing. "Hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. My uncle is in town with my aunt and the children. I stayed behind to catch up on some work." Relief flickered across his features. "Good, that is I was hoping to speak with you. Then you should come up and sit," she said, gesturing to the chair beside her. "It's too warm to stand in the sun." Sam hesitated, then tied his horse to the hitching post and climbed the porch steps. He seemed almost nervous, a stark contrast to his usual confidence. "Can I offer you some lemonade?" Nora asked, suddenly aware of her quickening pulse. "It's fresh, made this morning." "That would be welcome, thank you." She went inside to fetch the drink, using the moment alone to compose herself. Why had he come? And why did his presence affect her so? They'd spent 1 day together, shared 1 meal, 1 night under the same roof, hardly enough to justify the warmth spreading through her at the sight of him. When she returned with 2 glasses, Sam was standing at the porch railing, gazing out at the distant mountains. He turned at her approach, and something in his expression, a mixture of determination and uncertainty, caused her pulse to jump again. "Your uncle has a fine spread here," he commented, accepting the lemonade. "Not as big as the Circle S, but good land, well managed." "Yes, he's worked hard for it," Nora agreed, resuming her seat. "Though I gather there have been challenges recently," Sam nodded, taking the chair beside her. "Water rights mostly. This drought has everyone on edge." He took a sip of lemonade, then set the glass down carefully. "But that's not why I came." "No," she tried to keep her tone light. "What brings the Circle S foreman to the Lazy K then? Surely not just to sample my lemonade." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good as it is, no." He met her eyes directly. "I came to see you, Nora." The simple statement hung between them, weighted with implication. "I see," she said softly. "And why is that, Sam?" He looked down at his hands, strong, calloused hands that had so gently tended a dying colt. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he admitted. "About that day, about everything." He raised his gaze to hers again. "I know it's forward of me, we barely know each other." "And I'm just a hired hand while you don't," Nora interrupted. "Don't diminish yourself that way. You're the foreman of the largest ranch in the territory, respected by everyone who knows your work, and I'm just a woman who came west because she had nowhere else to go." Surprise registered on his face. "Is that how you see yourself?" "It's the truth," she said simply. "My father left debts, my mother's health is poor, and I had few prospects in St. Louis. Coming to Montana wasn't just about adventure, it was necessity. Does your uncle know that?" "He knows some of it, enough," she shrugged slightly. "Pride makes it difficult to admit the full extent of our circumstances." Sam nodded slowly. "I understand pride," he said. "It's kept me from coming here sooner." "That and knowing how it might look, the Circle S foreman calling on Thomas Keating's niece." "And how does it look?" Nora asked, her heart beating faster, presumptuous probably. His blue eyes held hers steadily. "But I had to come anyway." "I'm glad you did," she admitted. Something shifted in his expression, hope kindling. "Are you?" "Yes," she smiled, feeling suddenly lighter. "I've thought of you too, Sam, more than I should, perhaps." He leaned forward slightly. "I don't have much to offer, Nora, no land of my own yet, though I've been saving." The Circle S pays well, and Mr. Stewart has promised me first right to buy the north section when he's ready to sell. But that could be years away. I'm not concerned with land or possessions, she replied. My father had both and still left us with nothing. I value character far more than property. Even so, Sam continued, your family might have other expectations for you. A woman like you could have her choice of suitors, educated men, men of means. Nora laughed softly. You overestimate my prospects, Sam. And underestimate my ability to make my own choices. She hesitated, then added, besides, I've yet to meet another man in this territory who would weep over a dying colt. Color rose in his tanned cheeks. You caught me at a weak moment. No, she said firmly, I caught you in a moment of truth. There's a difference. She leaned closer, lowering her voice though there was no one to overhear. It was that moment when you said you still cared too much that I knew you were someone worth knowing. The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Sam's eyes darkened with emotion, and for a breathless moment, Nora thought he might reach for her hand, might close the distance between them. Instead, he straightened, his expression becoming more formal. I should speak to your uncle. Ask his permission to call on you properly. The propriety was both endearing and frustrating. Yes, I suppose that would be the correct approach, Nora agreed, hiding her disappointment at the interruption of their intimate conversation. When will he return? Tomorrow afternoon, most likely. They've gone to Billings for supplies. Sam nodded, rising from his chair. Then I'll return tomorrow, if that's acceptable to you. More than acceptable, Nora assured him, standing as well. They faced each other on the porch, suddenly awkward despite the understanding reached between them. Sam cleared his throat. Until tomorrow, then. Until tomorrow, she echoed. He replaced his hat, tipped it slightly, and descended the steps. Nora watched as he untied his horse, mounted with fluid grace, and rode away. Only when he was nearly out of sight did she realize she was smiling so widely her cheeks ached. True to his word, Sam returned the following afternoon, timing his arrival to coincide with Thomas Keating's return from town. Nora watched from the window as the two men spoke in the yard, her uncle's initial surprise giving way to cautious consideration. When they moved toward the house together, she knew some agreement had been reached. Nora, her uncle called as he entered, Mr. Sawyer has made a rather unexpected request. He wishes my permission to court you properly. She turned from the window, trying to maintain a composed expression despite the joy bubbling within her. And what did you tell him, Uncle? Thomas studied her face. I said I would consider it, pending your feelings on the matter. His eyes narrowed slightly. Though I suspect you already know your own mind. I do, she acknowledged. I would welcome Mr. Sawyer's attentions, her uncle sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. You realize this may cause talk. Samuel Sawyer is respected for his abilities, but he's a man with a past, Nora. He fought for the Confederacy, was wounded at Vicksburg, came west with nothing but the clothes on his back and whatever demons haunted him. We all have pasts, Uncle Thomas, she said quietly, and we all deserve the chance to build a future. He regarded her thoughtfully. You're very like your mother, seeing the best in people, believing in second chances. A smile softened his weathered features. Very well, if this is what you want, you have my blessing. Thank you, Nora said, impulsively embracing him. It means more than I can say. Just be careful with your heart, he murmured. The West changes men, makes them hard sometimes. Or perhaps it reveals what's truly inside them, she countered. Either way, I trust my judgment. Thomas nodded, then moved toward the door. He's waiting on the porch. I told him we'd give our answer directly. Together they went outside, where Sam stood with hat in hand, his posture straight but tension evident in the set of his shoulders. His eyes immediately sought Nora's, and the hope she saw there made her heart swell. Mr. Sawyer, Thomas said formally, we've discussed your request. If Nora is agreeable, you have my permission to call on her. Sam's gaze remained fixed on Nora, silently asking the question again. I am agreeable, she said, unable to keep the warmth from her voice. Very much so. The smile that transformed Sam's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then suddenly brilliant. "Thank you, sir," he said to Thomas, though his eyes never left Nora. "I give you my word I'll treat her with the utmost respect." "See that you do," Thomas replied, though there was no real sternness in his tone. "Now, I believe Martha has prepared some refreshments. Will you join us, Mr. Sawyer?" "Gladly, sir." What followed was the beginning of a courtship unlike any Nora had experienced in St. Louis. Sam rode to the Lazy K every Sunday, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wildflowers gathered along the way, once a length of blue ribbon that matched her eyes. They would walk the property together, talking of everything and nothing, his hopes for eventually acquiring his own ranch, her dreams of establishing a proper school, their shared love of literature discovered during those Sunday conversations. Sometimes they rode out together, always with Nora's young cousin Emma as chaperone, exploring the beautiful countryside that was becoming increasingly precious to Nora. Sam showed her hidden valleys where wildflowers bloomed in profusion, secluded creeks where trout darted in the clear water, vantage points that offered breathtaking views of the distant mountains. On one such expedition in late August, they paused at the top of a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of golden prairie. Emma had ridden ahead, giving them a rare moment of relative privacy. "It's beautiful," Nora said, gazing at the landscape spread before them. "I never imagined Montana would come to feel like home, but it has." "Is that what it is now?" Sam asked quietly. "Home," she turned to look at him, struck anew by the handsome lines of his profile against the endless blue sky. "Yes," she said simply, "more so than St. Louis ever was in some ways." Sam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I felt the same way when I first came here, like I'd found the place I was meant to be after wandering lost for so long." "After the war?" she asked gently. "Yes." His voice grew distant. "I was angry when I came west. Bitter about everything that had been lost. Took me years to let go of that anger." "What changed?" He considered the question. "Time, distance, and this land." He gestured toward the sweeping vista. "Hard to stay bitter when faced with something so much bigger than yourself. Makes a man's grievances seem small by comparison." Nora understood. The vastness of Montana had a way of putting human concerns in perspective. "And now?" she asked. "What do you feel now?" Sam turned to her, his blue eyes intense. "Hope," he said simply, "for the first time in a long while." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Nora's heart quickened as Sam moved his horse closer to hers, close enough that their knees nearly touched. "Nora," he began, his voice low, "I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Nora, Sam," Emma's voice floated back to them from down the trail. "Come quick, I've found something amazing." The moment broken, they exchanged rueful smiles. "We should catch up with her," Nora said reluctantly. "She has a talent for finding trouble when left to her own devices." "Another time then," Sam agreed, though the intensity remained in his gaze. Emma's discovery proved to be a family of foxes denning near a fallen log worthwhile, despite the interruption. But as they rode home that afternoon, Nora couldn't help wondering what Sam had been about to say before they were interrupted. The possibility that hovered in her mind both thrilled and terrified her. September brought the first hints of autumn to Montana, cooler nights, touches of gold in the aspen groves, a sense of urgency as ranchers prepared for the coming winter. The Circle S was busy with fall roundup, limiting Sam's visits to brief, precious hours stolen between his demanding responsibilities. On one such visit, he arrived looking exhausted, with several days' growth of beard shadowing his jaw. Nora met him at the hitching post, concern evident in her expression. "Sam, you look worn to the bone. When did you last sleep properly?" He dismounted stiffly, offering a tired smile. "Been a while," he admitted. "Roundup's nearly finished, but we lost some cattle in the north pastures. Been tracking strays for 3 days. You should be resting, not riding all the way here," she scolded gently, taking his arm. "Come inside, at least have some coffee before you head back." "I had to see you," he said simply. "Feels like weeks since we've talked." Her heart warmed at his words. Inside the house, she settled him at the kitchen table while she prepared coffee and put together a plate of leftover biscuits and ham. Martha, seeing Sam's condition, tactfully withdrew to give them privacy while remaining within proper chaperoning distance. "Eat," Nora instructed, placing the food before him. "You look half-starved." Sam didn't need to be told twice. As he ate, color returned to his face and some of the tension eased from his shoulders. "That's better," Nora said, sitting across from him. "Now tell me about the roundup." He described the long days in the saddle, nights spent under the stars, the satisfaction of seeing healthy cattle counted and sorted. "Should be finished in another week," he concluded. "Then things will quiet down until winter feeding starts." "And you'll have more time to rest," she observed, "and perhaps to visit." "That's my hope." He reached across the table, hesitating briefly before covering her hand with his. It was the first time he'd touched her so deliberately, and the warmth of his calloused palm against her skin sent a pleasant shiver through her. "Nora, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart began to pound. "Yes." "The harvest dance in Billings is next Saturday," he said, his blue eyes intent on hers. "I'd be honored if you'd accompany me." Though not what she'd been hoping for, the invitation delighted her. "I'd love to, Sam." "But are you sure you want to face all that socializing after such an exhausting month?" A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "For the chance to dance with you, I'd face far worse." The warmth in his voice made her blush. "Then yes, I accept." His hand tightened briefly on hers, then withdrew as footsteps in the hallway announced Martha's return. "Good," he said, his voice returning to its normal register. "I'll come for you at 4. The ride to town takes about 2 hours." The harvest dance was the social event of the season, bringing together families from ranches and homesteads across the county. Held in the newly constructed town hall in Billings, it was an occasion for rare finery and celebration before the harsh winter months descended. Nora spent the week preparing, altering her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and helping her aunt bake for the communal supper that would accompany the dance. By Saturday, anticipation had built to such a pitch that she could hardly sit still as she waited for Sam's arrival. When he finally rode up, she barely recognized him. Gone was the dusty cowboy in working clothes. In his place was a striking figure in a dark suit, crisp white shirt and string tie. He'd had his hair trimmed and was freshly shaven, revealing the strong lines of his jaw. Only his hat, the same battered Stetson, and his well-worn boots betrayed his usual identity. "You look beautiful," he said, as he helped her into the buggy he'd borrowed for the occasion. "As do you," she returned, admiring his transformation. "I almost didn't recognize you without a layer of trail dust," he laughed, settling beside her on the seat. "Don't get used to it. Come Monday, I'll be back in denims and flannel." "I like you in those too," Nora admitted, then blushed at her own boldness. Sam's smile deepened as he flicked the reins, starting the horses down the lane. "Good to know." The ride to Billings passed quickly, filled with easy conversation and shared anticipation. As they approached the town, Nora could see wagons and buggies converging from all directions, carrying families dressed in their best attire. "Looks like the whole county turned out," Sam observed. "It's an important tradition," Nora replied. "A celebration before winter sets in." The town hall was festooned with autumn decorations, dried cornstalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves gathered from the cottonwood groves along the Yellowstone River. Long tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by area families, while a small band tuned instruments in the corner. As they entered, Nora was acutely aware of the attention they drew. Sam Sawyer, the solitary Circle's foreman, escorting Thomas Keating's eastern niece, it was bound to cause speculation. But Sam seemed unconcerned, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. They joined her aunt and uncle at a table near the dance floor. Thomas raised an eyebrow at their arrival but offered Sam a friendly handshake. "Good to see you cleaned up, Sawyer," he said with a hint of humor. "Almost didn't recognize you without your horse." "Hardly recognized myself, sir," Sam replied good-naturedly. "Been a while since this suit saw daylight." The evening progressed pleasantly, with abundant food and lively conversation. Sam proved surprisingly adept at social interaction when he chose to make the effort, charming Martha with his attentiveness and impressing Thomas with his knowledgeable discussion of cattle markets. When the music began, Sam turned to Nora with a questioning look. "May I have this dance, Miss Keating?" "You may, Mr. Sawyer," she replied, placing her hand in his. As he led her onto the dance floor, Nora realized she'd never been this close to him before. His hand at her waist, hers resting on his shoulder, their other hands clasped together, the proper positioning for a waltz, suddenly felt startlingly intimate. "I should warn you," Sam said softly as they began to move. "It's been years since I danced with a lady." "You're doing just fine," she assured him, though in truth, his steps were a bit stiff. "Besides, I'm hardly an expert myself." He relaxed slightly, and their movements became more fluid as they circled the floor. "Where did you learn to dance?" Nora asked. "Somehow I can't picture waltzing being part of ranch life." A shadow crossed his face. "My mother taught me before she died, said every gentleman should know how to dance." His expression softened with memory. "She'd play the piano and make me practice with her. I complained bitterly at the time. And now I'm grateful," he said simply, his eyes holding hers. "For many reasons." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. They continued around the floor, gradually finding a comfortable rhythm together. By the time the music ended, they were moving as one, reluctant to break apart when the final notes faded. "Thank you," Sam said, his voice low as he escorted her back to their table. "That was worth waiting for." The evening continued with more dancing, not just with Sam. As propriety demanded, she accept invitations from other young men as well. But her eyes constantly sought his across the room, and she noticed how his followed her movements even as he engaged in conversation with others. Near midnight, as the celebration began to wind down, Sam found her by the refreshment table. "Walk outside with me," he asked quietly. "Just for a moment." The impropriety of such a request was minor, but still, Nora glanced toward her aunt, who gave a small nod of permission. "Just for a moment," she agreed. Outside, the night air was crisp with autumn's approach, the sky ablaze with stars. They walked a short distance from the hall, still within sight of the doorway but beyond the immediate hearing of those inside. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Sam asked, his breath forming slight clouds in the cool air. "Very much," Nora replied. "It's been a wonderful evening," he nodded, seeming suddenly nervous. "I'm glad." He paused, then continued with determination. "Nora, there's something I've been trying to tell you for weeks now." Her heart quickened. "Yes." Sam took a deep breath. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you kneeling beside that Colt, refusing to give up even when I had. And every day since has only confirmed what I knew then, that you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met." Joy surged through Nora, bright and overwhelming. "Oh, Sam," she whispered, "I love you too." His expression transformed, hope and happiness chasing away the nervousness. "You do." "With all my heart," she affirmed. "How could I not? You're the finest man I know." In a single step, he closed the distance between them, one hand coming up to cup her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "May I kiss you, Nora Keating?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," she breathed. The touch of his lips on hers was soft, reverent, a first kiss that spoke of devotion rather than passion. Yet beneath that gentleness, Nora sensed a depth of feeling that made her heart race. When they parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I have nothing to offer but myself," he said quietly. "No land yet, no real home, just the promise that I'll work every day to be worthy of you." Nora placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "That's all I want, Sam, just you." He drew back slightly to look at her, wonder in his eyes. "Then will you marry me, Nora? Not right away, I need time to build something for us to make sure I can provide properly, but knowing you'll be waiting that we have a future together." "Yes," she interrupted, happiness bubbling up like a spring. "Yes, I'll marry you, and I don't need a grand house or vast lands, just a home we build together." Sam's smile was radiant in the starlight. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing something small that glinted faintly. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he admitted, waiting for the right moment. He opened his palm to reveal a simple silver band set with a small sapphire. "It was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing of value I brought with me from Texas. I've kept it all these years, hoping someday to find a woman worthy of wearing it." Tears welled in Nora's eyes as she understood the significance of such a gift. "Sam, I'm honored. It's beautiful." With slightly trembling fingers, he slipped the ring onto her hand. It fit perfectly, the sapphire catching the starlight. "Like it was made for you," he murmured. They sealed their engagement with another kiss, this one deeper, a promise of the future they would share. Only reluctantly did they part, aware of the propriety they still needed to maintain. "We should tell my aunt and uncle," Nora said, though she was loath to share their precious bubble of happiness with anyone just yet. "Yes," Sam agreed. "Your uncle deserves to hear it from me man to man." They returned to the hall hand in hand, their shared joy evident in their expressions. Thomas spotted them immediately, his experienced eyes noting the change between them. He met them halfway across the floor, Martha close behind. "Well," he said, looking from Nora's glowing face to Sam's determined one, "I believe congratulations are in order, sir." Sam asked, surprised by the perception. Thomas smiled slightly. "I recognize that look, Sawyer. Wore it myself once." He extended his hand. "You have my blessing for what it's worth, though I suspect my niece has already given hers." "She has," Sam confirmed, shaking Thomas's hand firmly. "And I promise you, I'll spend my life making sure she never regrets it." Martha embraced Nora, tears in her eyes. "My dear girl," she whispered, "I'm so happy for you." Word spread quickly through the gathering, and soon they were surrounded by well-wishers. The band struck up a special song in their honor, and Sam led Nora onto the floor for one final dance as fiancé and fiancée. "Are you happy?" he asked as they moved together, oblivious to the smiling faces around them. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" His blue eyes held hers with a depth of emotion that took her breath away. "More than I ever thought possible," he said. "You've given me back something I thought was lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope," he said simply. "A future worth building." As they circled the floor in perfect harmony, Nora reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment, from the refined parlors of St. Louis to the wild beauty of Montana, from uncertain exile to the certainty of Sam's love. All because she'd happened upon a cowboy crying over a dying colt one summer day. "What are you thinking?" Sam asked, noticing her smile. "That sometimes caring too much is exactly the right amount," she replied. His answering smile was tender with understanding. "I'm beginning to believe that myself." Winter descended upon Montana with characteristic ferocity, transforming the landscape into a white wilderness. Sam and Nora's courtship continued despite the challenges of weather and distance, with Sam making the journey to the Lazy K whenever conditions permitted. On the worst days, when travel was impossible, Nora would stand at her bedroom window, gazing toward the distant Circle S and wondering if Sam was doing the same. They planned a spring wedding, agreeing that the harsh winter months were no time to begin a marriage, particularly when Sam was needed at the Circle S for the difficult task of keeping cattle alive through blizzards and bitter cold. Christmas brought a brief respite from winter's isolation. Sam arrived at the Lazy K on Christmas Eve bearing gifts: a fur-lined cloak for Nora, handmade toys for her young cousins, a fine bottle of brandy for Thomas. But his most meaningful present came later, when the household had retired and they sat alone by the fire, chaperoned only by the sleeping family dog. I have something else for you, Sam said, reaching into his pocket. Something more significant than the cloak, though perhaps less practical. He handed her a folded document, watching expectantly as she opened it. Nora's eyes widened as she read the legal language. Sam, this is a deed. He nodded, a hint of nervousness beneath his calm exterior. Mr. Stewart made good on his promise. Sold me the north section of Circle S land, 300 acres, including water rights to Cottonwood Creek. It's not much compared to the big ranches, but it's good grazing land with a decent stand of timber. Your own ranch, Nora breathed, understanding the significance. Oh, Sam, that's wonderful. Our ranch, he corrected gently. Look at the names on the deed. She glanced down again, and tears filled her eyes when she saw it. Samuel James Sawyer and Nora Elizabeth Keating Sawyer, joint owners. I wanted you to have equal claim, Sam explained. To know that what we build will truly be ours together, not just mine. Nora was speechless, overwhelmed by the trust this represented. In a time when women rarely held property in their own names, Sam's gesture was extraordinarily progressive. There's no house yet, he continued, mistaking her silence for disappointment. Just the old line cabin for now, but I've been cutting timber all fall, seasoning it for building in the spring. By our wedding day, I'll have the foundation laid for a proper home. Sam, she finally managed, reaching for his hand. It's perfect, more than I ever expected. Relief flooded his features. You're not disappointed. I know it's not much compared to what you had in St. Louis. It's everything, she interrupted firmly. Land of our own, a home we'll build together. What more could I want? His smile was worth all the fine houses in St. Louis. I was hoping you'd feel that way. He squeezed her hand gently. I want to give you the world, Nora. You already have, she replied softly. The moment you let me see your heart. The months until spring seemed interminable, yet somehow rushed at the same time. Nora divided her time between teaching, helping with ranch chores, and preparing for her new life. She sewed linens, quilted blankets, and collected household essentials, storing them in trunks that would eventually travel to her new home. Sam, meanwhile, worked tirelessly on their future homestead. Whenever he visited, he brought news of progress, timber cut and milled, stone gathered for the foundation, a well dug near the building site. He spoke of his plans with such enthusiasm that Nora could almost see the home rising from the Montana soil, solid and welcoming. By early April, the worst of winter had released its grip on the land. Green began to reclaim the valleys, and the promise of their May wedding seemed finally within reach. Then, just as hope blossomed with the spring flowers, disaster struck. It began with a rider from the Circle S, arriving at the Lazy K in a lather of urgency. Nora was in the yard when he galloped up, her heart freezing at the sight of Sam's second-in-command, Jake Miller. Miss Keating, he called, dismounting in a rush. Is your uncle here? We need help at the Circle S. Thomas emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. What's happened, Miller? Jake removed his hat, revealing a grim expression. Rustlers hit us last night, took nearly 100 head from the east pasture. Sam and 4 men went after them at first light, but he hesitated, glancing at Nora. Go on, she urged, dread coiling in her stomach. They were ambushed in Box Canyon, Jake continued reluctantly. 2 of our boys rode back with the news. Sam and Bill Dawson were pinned down by gunfire when they left. Sam's hurt, Nora asked, her voice barely steady. Don't know, miss. The boys didn't see him go down, but they couldn't get back to him either. Mr. Stewart's organizing a party to ride to their aid, and he asked if the Lazy K could spare some men. Thomas was already moving toward the house. We'll be ready in 20 minutes. Tell James and the hands to saddle up. I'm coming too, Nora stated, her tone brooking no argument. Both men turned to her in surprise. Absolutely not, Thomas declared. This is no place for a woman, Nora. Sam is my fiancé, she replied steadily. I'm trained in medical care. If he's injured, if anyone is injured, you may need me. It's too dangerous, Jake protested. These rustlers mean business. They've already shot 2 men. Then you'll need every capable person, Nora countered. I can ride as well as any man here, and I can use a rifle if necessary. Thomas studied her determined expression, then sighed in resignation. There'll be no stopping you, will there? None whatsoever, she confirmed. Then get ready, he conceded. But you'll stay with the main group, Nora, no heroics. Within the promised 20 minutes, a party of 6 rode out from the Lazy K. Thomas, James, 3 ranch hands, and Nora, dressed in her most practical riding clothes with medical supplies packed in her saddlebags. They rode hard for the Circle S, meeting the larger group of armed men assembled at the main ranch house. Robert Stewart, the owner of the Circle S, looked grim as he outlined the situation. Box Canyon is about 10 miles northeast of here. Narrow entrance, high walls, a perfect spot for an ambush. According to the men who made it back, Sam and Bill were taking cover behind some boulders about halfway through the canyon when the shooting started. How many rustlers? Thomas asked. At least 6, possibly more, Stewart replied. Well armed and well organized. Not your typical opportunistic thieves. Nora listened intently, fear for Sam warring with determination to remain calm and useful. When Stewart finished his explanation, she approached him directly. Mr. Stewart, I'm Nora Keating, Sam's fiancée. Recognition dawned in his weathered face. Miss Keating, Sam speaks highly of you. He glanced at her riding attire with a raised eyebrow, though he didn't mention you'd be joining our rescue party. I have medical training, she explained. If Sam or the others are injured, I can help. Stewart considered this, then nodded. Stay with the main group. We'll handle the fighting, you handle the doctoring if needed. He turned to address the assembled men. Mount up, we've wasted enough daylight. The ride to Box Canyon was tense and largely silent. Nora kept pace easily, her mind focused on what might await them. She refused to contemplate the worst, concentrating instead on what she could do if Sam was injured. The medical knowledge her father had shared over the years would not fail her now. As they approached the canyon, Stewart signaled for quiet, dividing the men into 2 groups, one to approach from the main entrance, the other to attempt access from the less obvious eastern rim. Nora remained with Thomas in the first group, her heart pounding as they advanced cautiously toward the narrow opening between towering rock walls. The silence was unnerving. No gunfire, no calls for help, nothing but the whisper of wind through the rocks and the soft footfalls of their horses. Could be a trap, one of the men muttered, or maybe they're already gone. Or maybe Sam and Bill are. James began, then fell silent at Nora's sharp look. Stewart raised a hand, halting their advance. Wilson, Myers, scout ahead, carefully. 2 men dismounted, moving forward on foot with rifles ready. Nora held her breath, watching their cautious progress. After what seemed an eternity, one turned and waved them forward. All clear, he called in a low voice. But we've got wounded men here. Nora didn't wait for permission. She urged Penny forward, galloping past the startled men toward the canyon entrance. Thomas called after her, but she paid no heed, her focus entirely on reaching Sam. The canyon opened before her, a natural stone corridor littered with boulders and sparse vegetation. About halfway through, she saw the scouts kneeling beside 2 prone figures. One was clearly Bill Dawson, recognizable by his red hair. The other, Sam, she cried, dismounting before Penny had fully stopped, stumbling in her haste to reach him. He lay partially propped against a boulder, his shirt dark with blood, hat gone, face pale beneath his tan. But at her voice his eyes opened, focusing on her with disbelieving joy. "Nora," he rasped, "what the hell are you doing here?" Relief flooded her at the sound of his voice, irritation close behind. "What does it look like? Rescuing you, you stubborn man." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Should have known you wouldn't stay put." She knelt beside him, quickly assessing his injuries. A bullet wound to his left shoulder, another graze along his right side, serious but not immediately life-threatening if infection could be prevented. "Hold still," she instructed, opening her medical bag. "This will hurt." "Already does," he grunted. but remained steady as she cut away his shirt to examine the wounds more thoroughly. The others arrived, spreading out to secure the area while Thomas and Stewart joined Nora beside the wounded men. Bill Dawson was conscious but weakening, with a bullet lodged in his thigh. "The rustlers?" Stewart asked as Nora worked. "Gone," Sam replied, wincing as she cleaned his shoulder wound. "Took off about an hour ago when they heard your party approaching. They got what they came for. The cattle." Sam nodded grimly. "Driven north, I'd guess, toward the Canadian border. We'll worry about that later," Stewart decided. "Getting you two back safely is the priority now." Working efficiently, Nora bandaged Sam's wounds, then moved to help Bill. Both men would need proper medical attention, but her field dressing would keep them stable for the journey back to the ranch. "Can you ride?" she asked Sam when she'd finished. "If the alternative is staying here, yes," he replied with stubborn determination. With help from Thomas and Stewart, they got both injured men mounted. Sam on his own horse, Bill doubled up with one of the hands. The return journey was slow and careful, every jolt causing Sam to pale with pain, though he made no sound of complaint. Nora rode beside him, watchful for signs of worsening condition. At one point when the others were slightly ahead, Sam reached over to touch her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for coming, for being the kind of woman who would. Did you expect anything less?" She asked, managing a small smile. "No," he admitted. "That's why I love you." At the Circle S Ranch house, the ranch doctor was waiting, having been summoned earlier. Sam and Bill were taken inside for proper treatment while the men gathered to discuss pursuit of the rustlers. Nora paced the porch, alternating between prayer and planning for Sam's recovery. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "Mr. Dawson will need time to heal, but the bullet missed the major vessels." As for Mr. Sawyer, he smiled slightly at Nora's anxious look. "He's too stubborn to die, apparently. The shoulder wound is clean through and I've stitched the side. With proper care and rest, he should recover fully." "Can I see him?" Nora asked immediately. The doctor nodded. "He's asking for you, just don't let him exert himself." Sam was propped up in bed, his shoulder and torso bandaged, his face still too pale but his eyes alert. When Nora entered, he attempted to sit up straighter, then winced at the movement. "Stay still, you fool," she admonished, hurrying to his side. "Do you want to undo the doctor's work?" "I want to hold my fiancé," he replied simply. "Come here." She sat carefully on the edge of the bed, mindful of his injuries. Sam reached for her hand with his uninjured arm, bringing it to his lips. "You were magnificent today," he said quietly. "Riding in like some avenging angel, taking charge of the situation. I've never been so proud or so terrified." "You're the one who was shot," Nora pointed out. "I think that earns you the right to be terrified." "Wasn't afraid for myself," Sam clarified. "Was afraid for you, riding into danger like that." She squeezed his hand gently. "I couldn't stay behind, not knowing if you were hurt," or she couldn't complete the thought. "I understand," he assured her. "Would have done the same." They sat in silence for a moment, the reality of what might have been hanging between them. Finally, Nora spoke, her voice determined. "I want to move the wedding forward." Sam blinked in surprise. "What?" "As soon as you're well enough to stand," she continued. "I don't want to wait until May. Life is too uncertain, too precious to waste a single day." A slow smile spread across Sam's face. "Are you proposing to me, Nora Keating?" "I believe I'm modifying the terms of our existing agreement," she replied with matching humor. "Do you accept?" "With all my heart," he said, growing serious. "But what about our home? The foundation isn't even laid yet." Nora shook her head. "The home will come in time. We'll build it together just as we planned, but I don't need a finished house to start our life together." "The line cabin is barely habitable," Sam warned. "Not what I wanted for you." "It has 4 walls and a roof," she countered. "We'll make it comfortable enough until our proper home is ready." She leaned closer, careful of his wounds. "All I need is you, Sam. The rest is just details." The love in his eyes was answer enough, but he voiced it anyway. 2 weeks, he said. Give me 2 weeks to heal enough to stand beside you properly, and I'll marry you whenever, wherever you want." 2 weeks, she agreed, sealing the promise with a gentle kiss. True to his word, 2 weeks later Sam stood beside Nora in the parlor of the Lazy K Ranch house, his left arm still in a sling but his stance steady and his eyes clear. The ceremony was simple, attended by family from both ranches and a handful of close friends. Nora wore a dress of ivory silk her mother's, sent from St. Louis when word of the expedited wedding reached her, and carried wildflowers gathered that morning. The minister from Billings performed the service, his words washing over Nora as she gazed at Sam, handsome despite his pallor in a new black suit. When they exchanged vows, his voice was strong and sure, hers clear and unwavering. The rings they placed on each other's fingers were symbols of promises already tested by fire and found unbreakable. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister concluded. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Sawyer." Sam's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a beginning rather than a culmination. When they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Samuel Sawyer, the applause was enthusiastic and heartfelt. The celebration that followed was joyous despite, or perhaps because of the circumstances that had precipitated it. Music, dancing, though Sam was limited to one careful turn around the floor with his bride, and abundant food created an atmosphere of festivity that lasted well into the evening. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, Sam and Nora slipped away from the gathering, mounting horses decorated with ribbons and flowers by the younger Keating children. Their destination was the line cabin on their new property, which would serve as their home until the larger house was completed. They rode slowly, side by side, savoring the beautiful evening and the knowledge that they were, at last, husband and wife. When they crested the final rise and the cabin came into view, Nora gasped in surprise. The humble structure had been transformed. Fresh whitewash brightened the logs, new glass sparkled in the windows, and a small porch had been added to the front, complete with 2 rocking chairs. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney and lantern light glowed from within. "Sam," she breathed, "how did you?" "I had help," he admitted with a smile. "Your cousins, my men from the Circle S, they've been working on it for the past 2 weeks while I was healing, wanted it to be a surprise." "It's wonderful," Nora said, blinking back tears of happiness. "Our first home." Sam dismounted carefully, then came to help her down, but instead of leading her toward the door, he drew her into the circle of his good arm, his expression suddenly serious. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Before we start this life together," concern flickered through her. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "That day you found me with the Colt when I said I still cared too much, it wasn't just about the animal." His eyes held hers intently. "For years after the war, I didn't let myself care about anything or anyone. It was easier that way, safer. I did my job, earned respect for my work, but kept everyone at a distance." Nora nodded, understanding dawning. Until the Colt." "Until the Colt," he agreed. "Something about that little fighter broke through walls I'd built so carefully. And then you appeared with your compassion and your strength, refusing to give up even when I had." He touched her cheek gently. "You taught me it was safe to care again, Nora, safe to hope, to love. You gave me back parts of myself I thought were gone forever." Tears filled her eyes at the raw honesty in his voice. "Oh, Sam. I just wanted you to know," he continued, "that whatever we build here, this home, our ranch, our family, it's all possible because you showed me that caring too much isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength we have." Nora rose on tiptoes to kiss him, pouring all her love into the gesture. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered against his lips. "And thank you for caring enough to let me see your heart that day." Sam smiled, the last traces of reservation vanishing from his expression. "Come on, wife," he said, the word clearly bringing him joy. "Let's go home." He led her to the cabin door, then paused with his hand on the latch. "Traditional to carry the bride over the threshold," he said ruefully, glancing at his injured shoulder. "Though I'm not sure I can manage it just now." Nora laughed, linking her arm through his. "We'll cross it together," she suggested, "side by side, just as we'll face everything else that comes." "I like that," Sam agreed, pushing open the door. "Together, then." They stepped across the threshold as one, into the warmth of their first home and the promise of their shared future. Outside, the Montana sunset painted the sky in colors no artist could capture, a fitting backdrop for the beginning of their life together. In the years that followed, Sam and Nora Sawyer built the ranch they had dreamed of. The line cabin served as their home for nearly a year, while the larger house took shape on a rise, overlooking Cottonwood Creek. By the time their first child, a daughter they named Sarah after Sam's mother, arrived, the new house was ready, filled with furniture Sam had crafted during the winter months and decorated with Nora's careful touches. The small school Nora established in one corner of their property grew to serve children from several neighboring ranches, fulfilling her dream of bringing education to the remote community. Sam's careful management of their land and livestock gradually expanded their holdings until the Sawyer Ranch stood as one of the most prosperous in the territory. There were challenges, of course, harsh winters, drought summers, the ordinary trials of raising children in a demanding environment. But through it all, they faced each obstacle together, their partnership strengthening with each passing season. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their 3 children play in the yard, Sam took Nora's hand, his thumb tracing the wedding band that had never left her finger. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Coming west? Marrying a rough cowboy instead of some Eastern gentleman?" Nora turned to him, the years having only deepened her beauty in his eyes. "Not for a single moment," she answered truthfully. "This life, our life, is richer than anything I could have imagined in St. Louis." Sam nodded, his gaze taking in their flourishing ranch, their healthy children, the community they had helped to build. "I still care too much, you know," he said with a small smile. "About all of it, about you." "Good," Nora replied, leaning her head against his shoulder, long healed now, though it still troubled him in cold weather. "That's exactly the right amount." As the sun set behind the mountains they both loved, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Sam and Nora Sawyer sat contentedly in the life they had built together, a life made possible by a chance encounter. A dying Colt, and the courage to care deeply, completely, without reservation. In the wild beauty of Montana, they had found not just a home, but the truest expression of love. The willingness to risk heartbreak for the joy of connection, to care too much, and find that it was, after all, exactly enough.